get a kick out of pushing that button every single time. It's an old 90s movie called Demolition Man. Has anyone ever seen Demolition Man? One hand? Okay. Well, Wesley Snipes, who was an actor and is now a felon, um, used voice commands to change how the lighting would go on or off. And instead of lights on, lights off, he would say, illuminate, deluminate.
Lights?
Nah, I've changed that. Illuminate. Deluminate. Ooh, isn't that nicer? Go ahead, you try it.
Illuminate?
Ah, Raymond, we got to talk.
Welcome to Friday, October 1st, as we've recently discovered. What are we doing today? Well, it's Friday, so we get to do another creature feature. And this week's creature feature is the creaturiest creature that has ever creatured, Typhon. We're going to talk about Typhon. Typhon is in sources I've had you read. So we're going to go over those sources with some detail from Hesiod. So this will be the last time that I directly read from the Theogony at length. And as I said, this week finishes the readings from the Theogony. But also a new reading that I posted for you this week from Apollodorus, a new source for you, talks about Typhon. And then we are also going to finish off. So last class. Sorry, was there a hand up here? Or? Oh, okay. Last class, before we were so rudely interrupted by the fire alarm, we were going through the Olympian gods. I have completed the audio for that, and it is up on the e-class, but I have yet to upload the video to YouTube. So you have the slides, you have the audio for both Monday and Wednesday, but you don't have the YouTube links yet. I will work to get those done as soon as possible. Sometimes the editing takes a bit longer when making it into a video form. But we will continue today to finish off with a whole host of diverse non-Olympian gods. Again, this is hopefully to make sure everyone is on the same page. This is not a list of names you must memorize. This is a list of names, hopefully, that I can add some context to that you have either seen in your sources or you will continue to see in your sources. And you may be confused. This is a first-year course. There's 150,000 names here. So I just want to provide you some information so that it's not as confusing as perhaps it may have been or will be moving forward. And then towards the very end of the class, I will introduce the semi-divine heroes. These are humans born of gods, and they will be our focus moving forward for the next couple of weeks. So I'll just introduce you to a bunch of names to them predominantly. And we've got one of those heroes here, actually on this amphora. Heracles is standing on... He's on my right. I hope that's also your right. And then there's a four-legged guy. This is Centaur Chiron, who is the trainer of heroes. So you'll see Chiron feature a lot in myths involving heroes. So, Typhon. Who is this crazy, crazy creature? He is the father of the monsters. He mated with Echidna. Do you remember Echidna, the cute little animal that lives in, I think it's Australia, but also the horrible creature that lives in the depths of the earth and eats human flesh? So they made love and gave birth to Echidna gave birth to two hounds, Orthos and Cerberus or Cerberus. Those are also two monsters. And then the Hydra, which we previously covered, I think, in week 1 or week 2. And then the Chimera. Now, you may be familiar with the word Chimera just as something that's all kind of mixed up, and that's effectively what this monster is. It has body parts from a whole host of different animals. And then the Sphinx as well, but our sources are a bit confused. We're not sure if Echidna is the Sphinx's mom. This is in the Theogony. We're not sure if Echidna is Sphinx's mom or if the Chimera is Sphinx's mom. In the Greek, it just says her, and there were two girls mentioned in the previous passage, so it's a bit difficult. So regardless, these are all family to Typhon. Typhon is also known as a kind of god of winds, devastating winds. The kind of winds that scrape off all vegetation and destroy fields. This is Typhon. And you might be making an association with an extremely similar word, typhoon. And this is not a bad association, but I do have some caution. Typhoon came into English, as best as we can understand it, from it came in from Chinese languages, but it originates in Arabic language, Typhon, for a flood or a storm. And then the Cantonese version of that word, so one of the dialects of Chinese that a lot of English speakers were familiar with for a number of centuries, is typhoon. And it is entirely possible that the spelling and the form of the English word is influenced by the English spelling of Typhon. So they are related in a way, but they are not, this is not a direct correlation. There are some scholars, predominantly 200 years ago, that liked to see European influence everywhere, that tried to say, the Greeks taught the Arabs how to say typhoon, and then they taught the Chinese, and then the Chinese taught the English. But it's that connection is just nonsense. There's no reason to suspect it other than Eurocentrism. So we've got Typhon here, and then it's going to flip to a larger photo. Yes, this is a photo, colorized, of course, because it's an old one. I laughed. We've got Zeus. And how do you know it's Zeus on the left? Yes. So we've got Zeus fighting Typhon. And Typhon's pretty crazy looking, eh? He's got some big old demon wings. He's got snakes for legs, or at least serpentine legs. How is he described in our textual sources? So this is Typhon in Hesiod. And Hesiod goes at length on Typhon, and I'm going to read it all out because it's just baller. It's just so cool. I get a monster movie playing in my head just from reading it, so hopefully my delivery will do the same for you. When Zeus had driven the Titans from heaven, Earth, pregnant by Tartarus, thanks to golden Aphrodite, delivered her last born child, Typhoeus, a god whose hands were like engines of war, whose feet never gave out, from whose shoulders grew the 100 heads of a frightful dragon. So we've got 100 heads, 100 dragon heads on Typhon in Hesiod. Flickering dusky tongues and the hollow eye sockets in the eerie heads sent out fiery rays. By the way, fire-breathing dragon heads. Each head burned with flame as it glared, and there were voices in each of these frightful heads. This is another $100 word, a phantasmagoria of unspeakable sound. Sometimes sounds that the gods understood, sometimes the sound of a spirited bull bellowing and snorting. So what Hesiod is doing here is setting up a creature. He's described some otherworldly creatures before, and we've talked about them. But he is setting this up. The gods only understand some of what Typhon says. So this is a beguiling monster even to Zeus, Hesiod's dude. So the sounds of a spirited bull are some of the sounds that this monster makes. or the uninhibited, shameless roar of a lion, or just like puppies yapping, an uncanny noise. Think of a horror movie when you have a baby crying and then you turn and look and it's a monster and so on. I think that's somewhat what's coming out here. Or a whistling hissing through long ridges and hills, that wind connotation. And that day would have been beyond hope of help, and Typhoeus would have ruled over immortals. And I think I cut off that word there. But he's going to rule over all. Typhon is taking over the world. His horror is spreading. Had the father of both not been quick to notice, he thundered hard, and the earth all around rumbled horribly, and wide heaven above, the sea, the ocean, and underground Tartarus. Great Olympus trembled under the deathless feet of the Lord as he rose, and Gaia groaned. The heat generated by these two beings scorched winds from Zeus's lightning bolts, and the monster's fire enveloped the violet sea. So we've got an almost monstrous description of Zeus as he rises to counter Typhon. You have to build Zeus up as a somewhat similar epic beast to take on the epic beast. And one has lightning bolts and the other has fire. Earth, sea, and sky were a seething mass, long tidal waves from the immortals' impact. Pounded the beaches, and a quaking arose that would not stop. Hades, lord of down below, trembled. The god of the underworld is afraid. Titans under Tartarus huddled around Kronos. The Titans, who had been eaten by Dad, are now clinging to him in fear. At the unquestionable clamor and fearsome strife, when Zeus's temper had peaked, he seized his weapons, searing bolts of thunder and lightning, and he leaped from Olympus, struck, and he burned all the eerie heads of the frightful monster. And when he had beaten it down, he whipped it good. It reeled off maimed, and vast earth groaned. A firestorm from a thunder-stricken lord spread through the dark, rugged glens of the mountains. This is some pretty serious shit. A blast of hot vapor melted the earth like tin when smiths used bellows to heat it in the crucible. And like iron, the hardest substance there is, when it is softened by fire in mountain glens and melts in bright earth under Hephaestus' hands. So the earth melted away in the incandescent flame, and in anger, Zeus hurled him into Tartarus' pit. So Zeus absolutely destroys Typhon, burns his heads, and then we have, I'm going to flip back here, melting the earth like tin, and then softened iron, the hardest metal there is. Now, I've talked a little bit about stone tools and metalworking because I'm an archaeologist, and I'll use any excuse to mention that. But here again, we are getting this kind of tool usage technology vernacular. Tin is a main constituent. You combine tin and copper to make bronze. And so bronze tools and bronze technologies requires both. It's an alloy. Iron is much harder than bronze. And that's one of the reasons why iron, if you've ever thought about or talked about the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and so on, the reason iron wasn't automatically used is it's because it's difficult to work. It's really, really hard to make it useful into anything unless you've got very, very hot fire. And so copper, which is much softer, was easier to work, and then the alloy bronze. Once technology had progressed to a level where they could melt iron and use it suitably, there's a whole host of other reasons, but it displaced bronze, as the metal of choice in weaponry. But it is the hardest substance there is, according to Hesiod. So iron is the pinnacle. And it is melting, just like in a crucible, from the hands of Zeus and this conflict. And again, we have this linking. This one's a bit more abstract, so I'll forgive you if you don't believe me. But we have this linking of technology and the conquest or control over the dangerous things in nature. Just to finish off Hesiod, from Typhaeus come the damp monsoons, but not these named winds, Notos, Boreas, and silver white Zephyros. These winds are God-sent blessings to men. Not all winds are Typhon, but the others blow fitfully over the water, evil gusts falling on the sea's misty face, a great curse for mortals, raging this way and that, scattering ships and destroying sailors, no defense against those winds when men meet them at sea. And others blow over endless, flowing earth, ruining beautiful farmlands of sod-born humans, filling them with dust and howling rubble. Typhon is defeated, but his winds live on, and his winds still harm you as a sailor, and they harm you as a farmer. And these are basically the two complete pillars of the Greek world at this time. So that's Hesiod's take. Pretty metal. What about Apollodorus? When the gods had defeated the giants, Gaia, again this is Gaia, the earth, became more angry. And she copulated with Tartarus and bore Typhon in Cilicia. He had a form that was a mix of man and beast. He bested in size and strength everything that Gaia had produced. As far as the thighs, he was man-shaped and of such immense size that he was taller than all mountains, and his head often touched the stars. I think a bit of a different picture here. One of his hands stretched out to the west and one to the east, and from them stood out 100 dragon heads. Not entirely different. From the thighs down, he had gigantic viper coils that, when stretched out, reached as far as the very top of his head and produced a great hissing. His whole body was covered in wings. Not two, just everywhere, wings. His coarse hair was whipped from his head and chin by the wind, and fire flashed from his eyes. And then again, we got the square brackets that was brought up earlier. This is a reconstructed text. Such was Typhon, so great was Typhon, when he threw flaming rocks as he moved against heaven itself with hissing noises and shouting, and he belched a great blast of fire from his mouth. When the gods saw him attacking heaven, they took refuge in Egypt. That's interesting. And being pursued, changed their forms into animals. So in Hesiod's version, we have gods that are afraid, absolutely afraid of Typhon. But they cower and cling to Dad, of all people. Here they flee to Egypt and they transform into animals to try and flee off into the wilderness. Zeus threw thunderbolts when Typhon was far off and cut him down with an adamantine sickle when he came close. He doggedly pursued him as he fled to Mount Cassios, which looks over Syria. Interesting, we've gone to Syria, we've gone to Egypt. There Zeus saw that Typhon was seriously wounded and engaged him hand to hand. But Typhon wrapped his coils around Zeus and got him in a hold. He stripped away the sickle and cut out the sinews of his hands and feet. Lifting Zeus onto his shoulders, he carried him across the sea to Cilicia, and when he arrived, put Zeus, into the Corsian cave. Likewise, hiding the sinews in a bear skin, he stowed them there. He set the dragoness Delphine to guard him. This girl was half beast. But Hermes and Agapan stole the sinews and put them back into Zeus. Yeah. Without being caught. Zeus, having gotten his strength back, suddenly flew down from heaven in a chariot pulled by winged horses, throwing thunderbolts at Typhon, and pursued him to the mountain called Nyssa, where the Morii deceived him as he fled. Persuaded that he would be reinvigorated, he tasted the ephemeral fruits. When the pursuit began again, he came to Thrace. So Egypt, Syria, Cilicia and Thrace are somewhat close together. Fighting around Mount Hamos, hurled whole mountains, but these were forced back on him by the thunderbolt, and blood gushed out onto the mountain. And they say that that the mountain is called Hamos, for bloody. As Typhon tried to flee across the Sicilian Sea, now he's going to the west, and Typhon is fleeing more, Zeus threw Mount Etna in Sicily on him. So this is where Etna comes from. Zeus just picked it up and slammed it on Typhon. This mountain is enormous, and down to this day, they say that the eruptions of fire come from it, from the thunderbolts that were hurled. But enough about that. It's a great way to end a sentence there. I'm done. Moving on. So, what do we have here? We've got a very different picture of the nature of the combat in Apollodorus. Does anyone have any idea, based on the themes that we've talking about? You don't need to know the specifics, but you've heard me read out Hesiod's account, and you've heard me read out Apollodorus's account. What might contribute to why this change has occurred? And what I'm talking about, the specific change I'm talking about, is the locations. Why might there be more locations? It's going to go to the back. Yeah, at the back there. Yeah, so this is exactly what I was looking for. So you've read the introduction to Apollodorus. Fantastic work. Yep, absolutely. I got a tele fist bump right there. Apollodorus is a later author. The world has become bigger. And so even if you didn't read that introduction, even if you don't know the historical context of the author, when you are reading these materials and you see these kinds of things come out, you can start making inferences about the world that this person lived in. If they're making mention of these far-flung regions, they have reason to make mention. Either they are accessible and a place that this person thinks you can go to or know of, or they are the furthest reaches of the earth and someplace no one can go to. And you should look to the information in the text to tell you which one does it seem like you're getting. And this is why it's very important to contrast the different versions of these stories that we have, not because we're trying to find the ethereal, true one, but because we learn more about the culture that created them, and we get to see multiple versions. There's no sinew being torn out and thrown back in Hesiod's version. That's pretty cool. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, this is an unrelated, possibly not important point, but I'm just curious. I remember reading about, I thought it was in Theogony, but I didn't see it from the clip here. Somebody had mentioned Typhon and said the great dreadnought Typhon. It was like dread and a.
Mm-hmm.
And so it certainly said, the word dread is in it. I don't know, it's not being, but juggernaut sort of comes to mind. So I don't have an idea of maybe really find basically any definition just on a cursory Google search other than dreadnought as being a type of like a warship.
Yes.
Curious, like, I don't know what the word is supposed to mean or where it comes from or anything like that.
So I wish I had a perfect answer of like, oh, I know exactly what this word is. I'm familiar with dreadnought being a name of a ship style, and knot is it's related to the English word nautical, and it comes from nauton, which is a sailor in Greek. And so a dreadnought, in my mind, is a dreadful sailor, but not like a bad sailor, like someone you don't want to meet on the sea. That being said, I do not know that for certain because when you get a compound word like dreadnought, it doesn't automatically mean the constituents of where it comes from. It can have it often has a slightly different meaning. So, but yeah, dreadful seaborne something or other is, and that fits with the ship. Rob, any other questions so far? Yeah.
This myth possibly have started from an actual hurricane that hit, I guess, the Mediterranean Sea? Because it's just a lot of, especially in the first story, a lot of it seems like kind of symptoms of what would happen.
So rather than saying start at the beginning. We cannot say for certain that there was one specific event, and there's one specific hurricane or one specific storm isn't going to leave traces that we can really investigate and find, unless someone specifically wrote about it in a text. But it is definitely telling us that these kinds of storms are things Greeks would see. And so in other versions of this course, so if you talk to people and they're like, why aren't you learning about this or anything like that? In other versions of this course, you will be taught different meanings and purposes behind myth. And one of them is to explain the natural world as a kind of, this is why we have hurricanes. It's because Typhon is doing whatever. I'm not particularly fond of that kind of explanation, not because it isn't true. People absolutely would do that. Oh, this is Typhon's wind. We better get out. I just think that it simplifies things in a way that I don't like. But absolutely, they would know storms like this and attribute it, at least some people would attribute it to Typhon.
And then also that like Typhon comes from the name. So being that it could be like, yeah. Like if that author had a connection to, sailors as opposed to farmers, the term dreadnought makes sense because that's like one of the greatest enemies to like fishers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it would specifically be meaning like a pirate, but the idea that this is an ongoing threat to say, but Typhon is a threat to us all. This is to sailors specifically. The winds will blow you off course. They will sink your ship. They will destroy your livelihood, and they will also strip your lands bare if you're a farmer. I will get to some questions here. I do have a video because, of course, I've got a video. I did a big exposition dump on you. Now let's watch some Disney's Hercules. If we can. Yeah? You gonna work this time?
Morpheus! Hit the lights, babe! Ladies and gentlemen, cats and chicks, that crazy cuckoo day is upon us, and that day is...
Tiny Slimy Day!
Dig it. When Athens was barely a dot on the map, on the edge of a new frontier, destiny called on a dapper young cat with a battle that made his career. He was buff, he was tough, he was armed to the teeth, bent on fearlessly frying his foes, packing plenty of punch in his thunderbolt sheath. Yeah, that's how the story goes. A terrible titan stepped onto the scene, trying to carve out a niche of his own. His brutal attacking sent everyone packing, and Zeus had to face him alone. Smelled like Limburger cheese, he was covered with fleas, from his rattlesnake knees to his nose. He could topple Olympus with one little sneeze, yeah, that's how the story goes. Now Zeus didn't worry, he let loose a flurry that left Typhon buried and crushed. And so it was written that Titan was smitten, he'd finally bitten the dust. That beast had been blown by one god on his own while striking this masterful pose. And a legend was born on that fateful morn, yeah, that's how the story goes. Yes, that's how the story goes.
So, as you can see, yes, let's clap for Hermes there, his wonderful performance. As you can see, that version follows Apollodorus' narrative. There's the mountain is crushing Typhon. No sinew being ripped out, but it is a kid's show, so I suppose you can't have that kind of gore. But yeah, so that's an exciting version of Typhon. There were a few lingering questions, so I would like to get to those, and then we can head on with the lecture. So if anybody, I think I saw something in the back here. Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Pardon me? Oh, so it's not as in nautical, but not as in. Gotcha. There you go. So my nautical diversion into Greek did nothing. It did not. Huh. Okay. Were there any other? Thank you very much for that. What was your name? Connor? Connell. Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, and we'll move on after this.
I guess it was also translated to some Greek word that somebody decided to use the word, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd been an appropriate academic, I could have gone into the Greek and figured it out for you beforehand. But yeah, you know what? I'll post on the message board or on the announcements what the Greek is, and then we can kind of move on. We're good with that? Cool. We already had you, Hermes. I do love the character they've got there, though. He's really fun. Okay, so what are the host of non-Olympian gods? So these are deities in their own right. They're powerful. They have they feature in our stories. I've got the Titans here. The Titans have obviously been featuring in a lot of our narratives here. But they're non-Olympians because, as I mentioned last time, they do not live on Olympus. That is the differentiator. You're an Olympian if you live on Olympus, and you're not if you don't. You can still be a powerful god. You can still do things. And so our Olympians, Cronus and Rhea, mom and dad, Prometheus, Oceanus, Atlas, Tethys, Themis. Oh, you can read that one on your own. I always mess it up. Mnemosyne. And then we'll go with, yep, that's the way it is. All right. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the Titans. We've already talked about them. We did the Titanomachy and all that kind of good stuff. I just want to let you know that they are in the list of non-Olympian gods. And then I've got here a sculpture of Atlas holding up. Traditionally, he's holding up the sky. He's holding up the heavens. That's one of the punishments of Atlas. But he's holding a globe, and in later iconography, he tends to hold the entire globe of the Earth as a thing. So, other non-Olympian gods. We've got underworld or chthonic gods. And chthonic comes from the Greek word chthon, which means ground or soil. So they are of the earth, but like under it and stuff. So, as was mentioned last time, Hades, an absentee in the Olympians, because he lives in the underworld. And so Hades is king of the underworld. Persephone is his wife. Charon is the ferryman, and we've got Charon depicted here, who helps you go across the river Styx, as well as other rivers in the underworld to enter the afterlife. Hecate, Thanatos, and many others. Hecate is, she's often associated with witchcraft. She is a friend of Demeter. And Thanatos is death. We're going to talk a little bit about him. But I wanted to jump on the word chthonic because I was Googling around trying to find a good image for like, what's chthonic? What can I show you? And a death metal band from Taiwan popped up. And I believe here's a sample of their music. So, chthonic, right? Maybe they can get some new fans. But that was the best image I had for something chthonic in Underworld. But Hades, king of the underworld and god of the dead. Now, he is husband to Persephone. She is queen of the underworld. But their relationship is kind of awkward, like so many others. He did not get consent to get her. But, like in so many Greek stories, the importance is not that he didn't get consent from her. That doesn't matter. He didn't ask her mom. And her mom is Demeter. And she was rather pissed off. So we'll go into that when we go into Persephone. But iconography-wise, imagery-wise, Hades is typically depicted with a black beard. And I have riches here. He's got lots of stuff. He's got food. He has banquets. And this is related to one of his other names that he's known by, Pluton, which is the guy who's got all the stuff, basically. He's lots of riches. And this is related to his Roman name, Pluto. And he also gets called Dis in the Roman pantheon. Yeah. Oh, I can't recall. But that many of these gods have a bunch of different names. I can throw that one up on the message board as well. So Hades, god of the underworld, and his wife Persephone. Now, before we go into the description of Persephone, I'm going to tell you Persephone is the individual on her knee in this image. Who's the individual standing? Just shout it out. And why is it Hermes? You can just say, you don't need to say the complicated word. You can just say, yes, the staff, the caducus. And I don't think you can see winged feet, but yeah, it's Hermes. And why do you think it might be Hermes? Exactly. And he's the one who brought her back and forth between the underworld and the overworld. What is the word we use to describe that job? Yeah. Exactly. Psychopomp. It's a fun word to say. So, Persephone, goddess of spring and daughter of Demeter. When Hades wanted a wife, he went to his brother and he said, Zeus, I need a wife. And Zeus went, oh, there's a girl, take her. And so he did. And Zeus didn't really care who it was. And Demeter was absolutely furious that her daughter had been taken. And so declared eternal winter. No more food. Everyone dies. I am queen of grain. This wouldn't do. Everyone on earth is going to die. And so a complicated arrangement was entered into where Persephone comes back to the earth from the underworld on an annual basis, and her coming makes spring appear. Her coming warms the earth. And the reason that she couldn't just live on earth full time, the literal text is she ate the fruit of Hades, pomegranate seeds. The allegorical interpretation is they consummated their marriage. But regardless, for whatever reason, she spends part of her life above the world with her mom and everyone else, and part of her life in the underworld. In the Roman pantheon, she is called Proserpina. And just to let you know, so she is the daughter of Demeter. She is also worshipped as part of the Eleusinian mysteries. So she is connected in with the cult at Eleusis. I'm not going to go through absolutely every one of these guys. I just wanted to mention a few of them. And I wanted to mention Thanatos for two very important reasons. One, I absolutely love the idea of non-violent death. So Thanatos is a god of a soft touch, when you pass away peacefully. And he's twin brother to Hypnos, sleep. So I really like that idea. And there is a different god for when you die all crazy-like. But I forget what it is right now. That was one reason. And we've got here Thanatos carrying someone off rather peacefully. And then the other reason I wanted to bring it up is, of course, Thanos. So, Thanos is named Thanos because they're like, Thanatos. Yeah, too long. Thanos. This was his name in the 70s. And in the original mythology for the comics, Thanos worshipped death. There was an incarnation of death in Marvel Comics, and he wanted to get it on with her. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you want to know why his name is Thanos, it's related to Thanatos and death. I guess you could say, maybe I'll make that a question, you could say the snap is a way of a peaceful death, but he also just full-on invaded other planets, and that's not peaceful. So, anyway, I love movies, and you all suffer for it. So, moving on to other non-Olympian gods. We've got just a bunch of personifications. These are natural phenomenon. Helios and Selene, or Selene. This is the sun and the moon. And I mentioned in last class that Apollo and Artemis also have solar and lunar connotations, but they are not the sun and the moon. That is Helios and Selene. The Horae are the seasons, the Hesperides are the sunsets, Eos is the dawn, and the wind and the night and the air and anything you could possibly think of is a god. There is a personification for almost every natural phenomenon. There are also the Furies. These are known as the Erinyes, and they are goddesses of vengeance and punishment. You will get your comeuppance from the Furies when you do something bad. Nymphs, these are female nature goddesses, nature spirits. Nymphs inhabit all of the non-city places of the world. So they're in mountains and springs and groves and rivers and meadows and all kinds of places. There's just nymphs everywhere. And they're almost always or very, very frequently depicted nude. And so in the Greek mythological landscape, there's just nude young girls everywhere. They're just littering the countryside, evidently. And we've got here a depiction of Helios. I threw it up here because my supervisor studies iconography of Sol, the Roman name for Helios. And I just really like it, so I wanted to show it on there. Other non-Olympian gods include satyrs. So you've heard me mention the satyr play and satyrs in a procession with Dionysus and satyrs associated with a whole host of other things. They are generally consorts to the nymphs. So nymphs are young ladies and satyrs are horny goat men. So they don't always have to have goat feet. I think I misspoke in a previous class. That is a subclass of satyr that have specifically goat legs. They are pan and pan-related satyrs. However, all satyrs have some goatishness about them, either like little horns or something along those lines. The Greeks associated goats with libido, and so to be goaty is to really, really want to get it on. And they are rural fertility spirits. And then here's two other kind of categories of non-Olympian gods. I've mentioned both of them already, Tritones and Erotes. So both of these, Triton is the son of Poseidon, and Eros is the son of Aphrodite, but they get abstracted out into these all-purpose Tritons and Eroses, or Tritones and Erotes. And this is they're kind of monsters in a way. They're not individualized. They're just in art they fill in the gaps and are used for extra visual interest. And there was a question about Cupid, or maybe I just got myself confused talking about it. Cupid is the Roman name for Eros, and you can also have a word you might be familiar with, cherub. Cherub is not a Greek or a Latin word. It actually comes from Hebrew, and it's more of a product of a later time period where you associate anything with wings as these things. Yeah.
It might be a coincidence, but that like you could have arrows that come from the word arrows.
Oh no, that's got to be that's got to be completely coincidental, because Eros and arrow. Yeah, no, I'll look it up just to be sure. But for the purposes of this class, where I consider myself to be right, I'm going to say no. But I will look it up. Why does Cupid have arrows? Because Aphrodite isn't particularly martial, so that's kind of interesting. And then just to kind of finish it off here, this is a list of names. Again, I'm not expecting you to memorize this list of names. I'm just letting you know that there's a bunch of dudes. And I think, do I have any women? I don't have any women, but I'm going to see if I can try. Technically, women aren't allowed to be Greek heroes, but I'm going to try and work it in anyway. But Heracles, Achilles, Orpheus, Actaeon, Aeneas, Jason, Odysseus, Perseus, Theseus, and many, many others. These are humans. They very frequently have human mothers, but not always. Sometimes it's a divine mother. But one of their parents is a human. And what this means is they get superpowers. They get superpowers, and they get to go around the world doing just semi-divine feats. So the big one is Heracles, of course. We've got Heracles depicted here doing one of his labors. And so these heroes, these semi-divine, semi-human characters will feature in the weeks moving forward. And that's it for today's class. So what did we do today? We went over Typhon at some length. He's the father of the monsters. He's in Hesiod, Apollodorus, and some of our other sources. We went over the non-Olympian gods, titans, personifications, and a whole host of other lists. And of course, that is not exhaustive. I did not tell you all of the non-Olympian gods. I just want to let you know that this is a vast and wide pantheon that is out there. And then the semi-divine heroes, just a very brief introduction to let you know that they exist as characters. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all on Monday. Mm-hmm.